Hey, I'm excited to share with you an interview I did with Horst Schulze, the founder, chairman, and CEO of the Capella Hotel Group and the co-founder and former COO of the Ritz Carlton. If you're passionate about customer service, excellence, and making a difference in people's lives, I promise you'll enjoy this interview. We're talking about Excellence Wins. It's his new book, a no-nonsense guide to becoming the best in the world of compromise.
This is the Craig Groeschel Leadership Podcast.
Well, Horst, it's an awesome honor to have you on the Craig Groeschel Leadership Podcast. I'm a massive fan of your work. I've enjoyed listening to you for years on podcasts, hearing you at the Global Leadership Summit. And I just got a advanced copy of your book, Excellence Wins, No-Nonsense Guide to Becoming the Best in a World of Compromise. I read it all the way through last night, and it's absolutely fantastic. It's a gift. I'm going to have our whole team read it. I want to ask you some questions about it and tell you thank you for writing the book. If someone doesn't know, you're actually the co-founder of Ritz Carlton, crazy famous for world-class customer service. Most people don't grow up hoping to be in the hotel business. Can you give us the story behind what led you into that industry?
Well, that's a funny thing. For some reason, I don't know. I made a decision when I was 11 years old and begged my parents to work in the hotel business, which was contrary to any bright parents would have had. Any kind of a job and work in a trade would have been an honor. Of course, becoming an architect would have been it in a small town in Germany. And so they were literally embarrassed. But after begging them for several years, when I was 14, they found a job in a hotel. It was the best hotel in the region, but unfortunately about 100 kilometers away from home, which was very far at the time. And so I started then the hotel business. I don't know what was the trigger point, but enough said when I tell you I never regretted a day.
Well, you may not know the trigger point, but what we do know about you is that your work ethic and your drive and desire for excellence has always set you apart. Horst, where do you think those values came from in your life?
Well, I was greatly impacted by the first restaurant manager, the Maitre D' where I worked. He truly impacted me. And early when I was 14, 15, he told us when I started working there as a busboy, mind you, and at the time that meant washing dishes, cleaning tables, and so on. He told us, never go to work just to work. Never go to your job just to work. Go there, come here to be excellent. And he represented that. He represented that excellence. He would have never entered the restaurant without looking perfect and doing everything absolutely right. Now, it went over my head at the time. Come to work to be excellent. After all, I have to wash dishes. But it impacted and it stayed with me. And I finally, within the time that I worked there for 3 years, I started to recognize the value of it.
Well, it shows in what you do. And in fact, the driving message behind your book is really how to serve people, how to put people first, how to have excellence in customer service. As a pastor, it's easy for me to make the application of why this is important, but I imagine there's some people that are listening right now that they might say, in my business or my profession, customer service doesn't really matter that much. What would you say to someone who has that perspective?
You won't have a business soon. So it's that simple. I mean, what does service mean? It means really caring for the customer that you have. Call them a customer, whatever, or a guest, what we call them. It doesn't matter. In my opinion, by giving great service meaning caring for the expectation, caring for the need of that customer who is in front of you, who you're dealing with, caring for them and showing that you care, and not only doing a transaction, like checking people in. If I check people in a way where I'm convincing them by my attitude, by my behavior, by my caring for them, I should be able to convince them to want to come back to me. Now, you try to run a business without guests, or try to run a business that has nothing but loyal guests. And that piece, which is called service, creates that loyalty, not a transaction. The transaction doesn't create loyalty, but it's this extra piece, this extra caring, which creates loyalty in customers, which creates an organization of excellence. I, of course, explained those pieces very carefully in my book.
It seems to me that your approach is a little bit different than some I've had. When I listen to some talk about customer service, you almost feel like they're trying to serve the customer in order to make a profit. You seem to be trying to serve the customer, and the profit is a byproduct. Can you comment on that?
That's exactly it. Rather than concentrate on the money, I concentrate on that which makes the money, which creates the money. So if I concentrate on that and concentrate on the customer, I will have a sustained, successful organization. Mind you, it is not a coincidence of all what we did. Mind you, every single hotel is a business unit by itself. And in every location, our philosophy of caring for the customer worked. In every single location, we were the leader in that market segment. And each one is a different business. It's that philosophy and that culture that created that service which made us successful. Now, it's a culture. And that's what I'm trying to show in the book. Here's how we create a culture where people want to care for the guest, people caring for people, and doing it in a way where it is convincing. And they can do it in a way where they're there to take care of the need and the wishes of the guests and not just fulfill a transaction of selling them a sock or a suit or whatever, but helping them to have the right suit.
Well, you talk about culture, and we know that values drive the culture. You've got a statement that, to me, is really moving. I've heard it said that you've said for years, we're ladies and gentlemen serving ladies and gentlemen. And I didn't realize that actually came from an essay you wrote as a teenager. Can you maybe unpack and tell me a little bit about that story?
Yeah, that also was driven by this first manager that I had, because you see, it was a very negative, and in fact, I was laughed at when I said I would work in the hotel business in my village. And now I'm working in that hotel, my dream. And I realized after working a couple of years, I was asked to write an essay in school, hotel school. It's the norm in Germany when you have a trade that once a week you go to a trade school. And so did I in a hotel school. So we were asked to write an essay about what we now feel about the hotel business. I was back in the restaurant working when I came to the realization, I knew it before, but never realized it. When my maitre d' walked to a table, the guests were proud that he came there. And I said, wow, this is a reversal. We are supposed to be the servants and they the important people, which my parent had told me. So when I saw that, and I realized this was happening all the time. When he went to a table, the guests were literally proud that he came there. Why? Because of the excellence that he created. With other words, he refined himself as a gentleman of excellence by what he did. And I realized, I can do that. If I'm creating excellence, then I am important. Then I'm defining myself, and it is important. So I wrote this. That's what I wrote. So my essay, I named my essay, and I entitled it, "We are ladies and gentlemen serving ladies and gentlemen." If we're excellent in what we're doing, we define ourselves as ladies or gentlemen. If we are not, we are servants.
That's good. That's powerful. I think the perspective can really be a mind shift in how people care for people. And one of the things you brought out, Horst, in your book that really stood out to me, you talked about that whenever a customer has a frustration, a problem, a complaint, that actually can be an opportunity to create a new loyalty. That's, I think, probably a new idea to some people. Tell me why you believe that's true.
Well, that's very interesting, because we started this very careful. In fact, we started it, and it was very clear that 96% of the guests that complain only want to get rid of their frustration. They want somebody to say, "I'm sorry, please forgive us." And that's the end. And of course, there's some percent that want something, and some have a real problem. And if I open my arms and say, "I'm here for you, I'm care for you, and then most of the guests that complained were embarrassed that they even complained and are amazed by the response of caring. In fact, we empowered our employees, truly empowered them. It's a buzzword in business, in all business now, empowerment, but we really did. We empowered our employees that every employee, any employee, has the right to make a decision up to $2,000 if the guest has a complaint to take care of the guest. Now, guests were amazed when the waiter said, if the guest said in the morning, the waiter said, I hope you had a nice night, and the guest said, no, I did not, my TV changer didn't work or whatever. And the waiter then said, please forgive me, sir, please forgive me. In fact, I feel so bad about my TV, and I will buy you breakfast. That nearly embarrassed them, but that made them loyal. In fact, we certified each employees in problem resolution because we knew that created amazement. We know from the guest responses they became loyal. So out of a negative, a real positive was created.
I want to stay on your comments briefly and highlight it a little bit just in case someone didn't quite catch it, but you give your team members up to $2,000 of room to solve problems and to create customer loyalty. And then you said something that I noticed because it stood out in your book, Excellent Wins, but you said that when you're apologizing, you said, please forgive me. Well, it may not have been your fault, but yet you're still taking ownership. What's the philosophy behind that?
Again, it came out of a survey. We had a study and we asked why they want to feel at home. And the guest said, I want to feel we found with analysis, they didn't want to feel at home. They wanted to actually feel like they feel subconsciously they remember their mother's home. That's how they want to feel. So we said, what is this? Well, in their mother's home, they were taken care of, everything they wanted. The mother was there for them. And when something went wrong, and they went to their mom and said, Mom, there is something terrible. Mom said, come here and took him in the arm. What can I do for you? I'm here for you. Mom never said, I call the manager, which usually happens when you have a complaint with somebody. They call the manager. And we realized the importance of that. In the subconscious of the guests, they want to get rid of it. They want somebody to say, I'm here for you. So that's why we had to empower employees to be here for them. But having said that, of course, first of all, nobody ever gave $2,000. They bought breakfast or bought a glass of wine or whatever, or in fact didn't charge for the room for one night. But we knew that even if it was $2,000, the average age of our guest was 43 years. We knew they could travel another 30. We knew how much he spent. We knew the value of that guest, lifelong value. It was worth spending $2,000 to keep the value, which around $200,000 loyal to the company.
You know, I had that exact thing happen to me. They sent home a wrong piece of clothing in my car when they loaded the car, and we didn't even notice till we got home. Well, we had to ship it to the right person because they just loaded the wrong piece of clothing, and the people called and said, we're going to comp your night at the hotel just for the trouble we put you through, which wasn't even trouble to me. But what that fantastic customer service created even a more passionate, loyal buy-in because that was well above and beyond the call of duty. It wasn't even a problem to me, but it was treated with care and concern, and that's an exact representation of the story you're talking about.
Yeah, well, we clearly started that. Any complaint is an opportunity to create a loyal customer. It's a great opportunity.
Your whole book is fantastic. I found that section to be one of my favorite sections of the book, and I think especially because as a pastor of a church, people get their feelings hurt a lot of times. They'll end up leaving over reasons that they're problems that were really solvable, and I think that I would recommend the book for that section alone. It's worth the price. To deal with complaints, to handle them well, to listen without making excuses, without passing it off. I want to highlight that because it was super important to me. I want to bait you just a little bit, Horst, and kind of get you ready to attack. If I told you leaders are born, they're not made, how would you respond?
I frankly don't believe that, because I have seen managers change from being managers, that meaning ordering, directing, controlling, to being leaders, meaning to guide people toward a great destination and encourage people to join in the vision of the organization. I have seen the changes made. Now, I have no real study if they didn't have it in them before. I don't know that, but I see people making considerable changes in the style in which they managed and convincing a manager. But unfortunately, there are not many leaders. There are not many. I have studied that too, and in fact, I looked around and met now, mind you, not a scientific, but a personal study of 65 general managers. After 3 years, I came to the conclusion that there were 5 who were leaders and 60 that were managers. That doesn't mean they weren't successful, those managers, but they accomplished it by control and order, and orders and directions and control. They didn't accomplish it, their successes, by convincing the rest of the organization to do the right thing. You see, leadership has to start with a great vision. But the question a leader has done, if that's the vision of the organization, is this vision good for all concerned? See, the manager doesn't ask that question. But I have seen managers changing from their control role and hierarchy role to asking, do I have an objective that's good for all? And how do I convince my employees, my people that work with me, to join me in that objective? By sharing the motive. Adam Smith wrote a book a long time ago, not Wealth of Nations, but the second book, where he identified the thinking of the human being very much. And he came to the conclusion there, orders and directions people cannot relate to, only to objective and motive. But if people can relate to objective or not, if that objective is good for all concerned, that's a decision the leader still makes. So leadership is a very important thing, and it is, of course, a very moral thing.
I agree with you 100% that leaders can grow. They do grow. I'm staking my life investing in that idea. And I want to bounce off what you said. There's a paragraph in the book that stood out to me about the difference between leading and managing. You wrote this, Horst. You said, leadership implies that somebody has a destination in view and is taking people to that destination. Managers don't do that. They only manage processes and force things to happen. Leaders, on the other hand, seek to create an environment where people want to do, I love that, they want to do the things needed to reach the destination. Can you unpack that a little bit for me? How specifically do leaders create an environment where people want to do on their own what's right?
Again, I have to be sure that it starts off, what is the vision of the organization? Where does the organization want to go? And once you establish that as a leader, you have to question yourself. In fact, you have to agonize. Is this good for all concerned? Is this good for the investors? Of course, that's the question you have to ask. Number 2, is it good for the customer? Number 3, is it good for the employee? And number 4, of course, is it good for society? Once I can say unequivocally, yes, it's good for all concerned, that gives me the moral direction as to how I have to move forward. I now have to align people to that direction, give them the motive, be sure, show them how they will benefit from those motives and from that direction individually. And that, of course, is very important today, because today the young people say, "What's in it for me?" So if I don't tell them what's in it for them, I'm not going to align them for sure. So I have to give in that direction. I have to be concerned that they truly understand what's the thinking of this organization. Where does it want to go? Where do I fit in? Where do I benefit from those motives? Once that is communicated properly and in proper systems, We had systems to make sure that every employee understood that. Systems play a role, processes play a role, but we had processes to be sure that every employee understood and every employee was aligned to it. Now that's alignment. Now we're all working together. Now we're all rowing in the same direction in one boat.
I can imagine, Horst, that there's some people kind of hearing what you're saying and thinking, okay, this is what needs to happen. I want to bring about the vision. And they feel a lot of pressure in the world today. And unfortunately, I think you've probably seen this, we all have, that sometimes that pressure to get results, it can lead to people taking shortcuts or compromising. How do we walk the line between completing a job, getting it done, and actually keeping the heart of a servant when it comes to serving people?
It's driven by your vision. You have to keep on reminding yourself where you want to go and not shortcut. The moment when your rush and your speed and the timeliness that is pressure, everything is pressuring you. The moment when you compromise anything, you're particularly compromising what the customer wants. Your organization is going to be in trouble. And that's what we do. We compromise. And today, every buzzword is saving money, and the whole thing of how do I make sure my report to Wall Street is correct. If I concentrate on that, sooner or later I'm going to do things that are taking away value from the customer. Sooner or later I'm going to say, why guests don't come here because of the flowers on the table, and I take them away. What have I done here? I have cut cost. I have not put in efficiency. But we're all pressured in that direction. I have to, as the leader, I have to concentrate. I have to make sure that the organization keeps on concentrating on what makes money. What makes money, and that's the excellence in service and delivery and product to the customer. That makes money.
It's interesting. It seems like in the world today that there is so much pressure. People are tempted to take the shortcuts, but that short-term view of serving or excellence, it ends up hurting you in the long run. I'm curious, Horst, about your opinions about how things are changing. We all know the world's changing rapidly. What people expect when they go to a hotel is changing. What people expect when they come to a church, when people shop online, their expectations are changing. How we consume is changing. How we talk, how we relate is changing. I'm curious as to your opinion, what do customers today demand in the service industry that maybe they would not have expected decades ago?
Yeah, well, there's a huge difference. In fact, luxury 30 years ago, when we started Ritz Carlton in the early 80s, luxury meant to the customer, you could see it, you could feel it around you and see it. Chandeliers, marble, oriental rugs, fine art, that was luxury. The same guest, the son of that same guest today, that's not luxury. That's a surrounding. It doesn't have to be chandelier, as long as the quality. Luxury to today's guest means do it my way. Do it my way. I want individualizing the product to the customer. It's not anymore. That's why in Capella Hotels, where I'm connected to still, that's the second company I created after Ritz Carlton. In Capella Hotels, we don't have check-in time and check-out time. They say, that guest says, I want to check in when I want to. If it is earlier, that is fine. And I want to stay later in the day, that's fine too. Why should I, in a resort, check out at 11 o'clock or 1 o'clock? When my flight is at 7, you want me to sit on the beach with my suitcases or what? They're saying, do it my way. The other thing that has changed dramatically is timeliness. Everybody wants it now. We knew, for example, in Ritz Carlton in the very beginning, that if during heavy check-in, that if the guest waited up to 4 minutes to check in, they were fine. Today, it's 20 seconds. They're fine for 20 seconds, but not longer. So speed, everything now. Do it my way now. Do it my way means luxury to that customer today. If you do it my way, and besides that, if you personalize it, meaning you know me by name. You make me feel important. They will never say it. In fact, their father arrived in a suit and tie. The son arrives in blue jeans and holes in him. And he says, look, I'm a dude like everybody else. But the reality is, they're saying, we know it for certain, we studied this. The reality, they're saying, make me feel important and recognize the money that I'm spending with you. More so than the father did.
I agree with you. I really do think people, right or wrong, that's what they demand, that's what they expect. And I love the way you've created a culture where your people don't just do what's expected, but you wrote a story that was really powerful to me about someone that was cleaning up a customer's room and found that the customer threw the nuts away from the cookie that I guess they'd picked up at the restaurant the night before. And tell our listeners, what did that employee do?
Well, in a case like that, you give him the cookies without the nuts, or give him a bowl of nuts. You respond to the customer. This is in every way. That's individualizing. If the customer sleeps on the left side, we should see that if he stays another night and put the slippers on the left side and not on the right side. We should be moving the telephone over there. That is exactly the individualizing I'm talking about. And that is what today's customer wants. Responding to their specific needs, desires, wishes, or idiosyncrasies for that matter.
You wrote about that idea and you talked nonstop about putting the customer first. And you said sometimes it's obvious what a customer wants, but it's not always obvious. And then you talked about trying to get inside the customer's head. Can you explain, how do you teach your team to do that, to notice which side of the bed they sleep on, where their phone goes? How do you teach them to get inside the head?
Well, we of course, were very vigilant. And in fact, every employee had a customer preference form in their pocket. And if the customer remarked anything that they liked, they noted it down, room number, and so on. So we knew it. In fact, we rewarded our employees to give us as many preferences as possible so that we could, if the customer was still there, if the guest was still there, could take care of it. Or when the customer came back the next time, we knew that they had mentioned that they like room 417. And when they checked in, we said, we understand you like room 417, we have it for you. And that creates loyalty. Everything was geared, frankly, to create loyalty. I believe a great company does four things. Number one, a company creates loyalty. And you do three more things. We should never interfere with number one. Number two, of course, a company finds new customers, or a church finds new attendants. Number three, and that's something different, you make sure that you get as much money from the customer as possible. By giving value. Otherwise, they're not loyal. And number four, what you do is efficiency. But the most important thing is that loyalty. In fact, if you would walk into any one of our hotels now, the Capella hotels, as I said, I'm still connected with, if you would walk in the kitchen, the furthest corner, and see the pot washer, and ask that pot washer, what is your objective here? He would say, to convince the guests to want to come back by what I'm doing. This is the whole effort. I'm not checking you in. I'm convincing you in that moment to want to come back, responding to you, caring for you, showing that I'm interested, making you feel respected and important. That's what it's all about. But creating that, what I try to say in the book, how to create that environment, that culture.
I love your heart behind this, to really care for people. And that's why in the epilogue, I was not surprised at all to hear you mention the fact that you have a Christian faith belief system. And Horst, we've got people from all sorts of backgrounds, religious beliefs, and our goal here is not to push Christianity down someone's throat, although I am a very passionate follower of Christ. But I'm just curious, how do your beliefs influence your drive for excellence in what you do?
There you are. I didn't want to put that down anybody's throat either, and try to tell a story of business, how to build a great organization, and what it is that you have to do to respond to the customer and so on. I try to really give a guideline. Here is a great organization and how to do it. But of course, I had to say who I am. And that's why the epilogue. And the epilogue is that I believe in Christ. And if you put it all in the whole book, the whole effort, the whole leadership goes into one thing: love your neighbor as yourself. It overpowered me when, as a young Christian, I first really understood that. I had heard the words in religious classes. I didn't hear it. No, I heard the words, but didn't think. But when I heard it first, I said, "Wow, love your neighbor as yourself." Wow, what an enormous expectation! What an enormous thing! What an enormous thing to do, and try and do that, live up to that. If you put that into business, it's the same thing. Just love this guest. Why wouldn't you? Just love your employee. And why wouldn't you?
Well, that love and that passion shows in everything you do. And that's why I'm really excited for my team to read your book. The book is called Excellence Wins. The subtitle is A No-Nonsense Guide to Becoming the Best in a World of Compromise. As a closing question, Horst, I'd love just for you to impart one more piece of wisdom to us. If you had one piece of advice or encouragement that you'd give to someone that's on the road to serving others with excellence, what advice would you have for us?
I would clearly, my big advice is understand what you're doing, understand where you're going to go. And I know I have said this before, but it's so powerful. Understand where you want to be as an individual, where you want to be as a department, as a business, as a family. Understand your dream, your vision. Make sure it's excellent. Make sure it's beautiful. But most of all, make sure it's good for all concerned. Once you have that, apply it, and there will be success.
Well, Horst, I want to tell you personally, thank you for your example. Thank you for your passion. Thank you for your work in putting together a book that's going to serve my organization and a lot of people as well. Congratulations on this work. I know it's going to impact a lot of people, and I want to tell you personally, thank you for your investment of time impacting a lot of leaders on the Craig Groeschel Leadership Podcast.
Thank you for having me on your podcast. Pleasure to be here.
Thank you for joining us at the Craig Groeschel Leadership Podcast. If you want to go even deeper into this episode and get the leadership guide or show notes, you can go to Life.Church/leadership podcast. You can also sign up to have that information delivered straight to your inbox every month. In the meantime, you can subscribe to this podcast, rate and review it on iTunes, and share with your friends on social media. Once again, thank you for joining us at the Craig Groeschel Leadership Podcast.